Hi, it's me, it's Abby. So this video is filmed on a kitchen floor. We're house sitting for some friends of ours at the moment while they're on honeymoon, and the kitchen is the best lighting in the house. So I'm sat on their cold floor drinking my herbal tea. Firstly, sorry for not posting like a long form video for so long, but I do have a good excuse. I've been doing chemotherapy, so I've been a little bit tired. In my last video, first of all, I had a lot more hair. I've lost a considerable amount of hair since I last filmed a long video. This is all from my radiotherapy treatment. If you're just watching this out of context, I have brain cancer, and I've been having treatment for since May. I had 6 weeks of radiotherapy. And my tumour is like living here. So this is where they've blasted my head with radiation. So all the hair has fallen out on this side. Oh, you can see my scar there. That looks pretty gnarly. Not being funny, but that does actually look quite cool. Anyway, but my hair is actually growing back a little bit. You can see like all the little tufty bits there that are growing back. I'm doing chemotherapy at the moment. But the type of chemo I'm doing, it's called PCV. Apparently, I'm not going to lose my hair. It's rare for people to lose their hair on this type of chemo. So that's a win, I guess. But yes, in my last video, I talked about my addiction story. I regaled all my years of chaos and self-destruction, why I started drinking so much, what my life looked like, how I destroyed everything. And today I'd like to talk about the flip side of that, sobriety, how I came to the realization that I needed to get sober, what my first steps were, etc. So towards the end of my drinking and drugging career, as I like to call it, I got many promotions. I got to the top of my game in the old drinking and drugging industry. Nothing to be proud of, but you know, if for some reason someone was holding me at gunpoint and they said, drink this bottle of whiskey without throwing up, I'd be able to do it. Or if someone had a gun to my head and they were like, throw this little ball into this red cup or we're gonna get you, I'd be able to do it also, you know. A misspent youth playing useless drinking games. Anyway, so at the end of my drinking career, I experienced rock bottom after rock bottom after rock bottom. Little summary. I moved to the States to be with a man who I loved. I destroyed that relationship with my alcoholism. He packed my bags and shipped me off to Canada. And by the time I got to Canada, my mental health was so poor. I was thinking about unaliving myself constantly. I was so depressed, that out of control, and hated myself so much. I was like, do you know what will probably make this situation better? I'll start smoking crack. Let's see how that goes. It did not go well. For some reason, it just made everything worse. Go figure. And I ended up having just a complete mental breakdown. I lost my job for my drinking. I ended up in a psych ward after an unaliving attempt. Basically, it was just like rock bottom after rock bottom. But none of these things, none of these like really quite traumatic experiences were a wake-up call for me. Like even just one of those things, like ending up in a psych ward, should really have prompted me to kind of take a look at my life, and my health and where I was at, and prompted like a self-reflective moment where I thought, seems to me actually my life's not going as well as I thought it was. Maybe I should change something. Like I had none of that. Like none of these experiences were wake-up calls. And I guess I wasn't ready to get sober. I wasn't ready to turn my life around. I hadn't come to that conclusion myself. You know, people could tell me all day long, like, you need to change or you need to stop drinking. That would not have resonated with me. I needed to come to that conclusion myself. Anyway, I got out of the psych ward. I kept on drinking. Then the pandemic hit. At that point, I'd been abroad for about 10 years. Like backpacking, like working my way around the world, just going from job to job, trying to sustain a living while also partying myself into the ground. And so I moved back in with my mum, something I'd never considered doing that before. Like going back to the UK was not an option for me. I had no desire to go back to the UK. Mainly because if I stopped this like traveler lifestyle, I would be confronted with myself and I'd have to look inward. And those were very dark, scary parts of myself that I did not want to explore. I didn't want to address any of my problems. I didn't want to look inward. And I just wanted to carry on my chaos spree because it was familiar and it had become my comfort zone. So stepping outside of that and actually making changes and getting better, that was actually really scary. I moved back in with my mum, and I didn't come to the realization that I needed to get sober straight away. I went on an almighty bender, of course. What else was I supposed to do? It was lockdown. there was nothing to do but drink. At the end of this bender, you know what it's like when you're drinking, and then it just gets a tipping point where you just can't do any more, and your body just stops, and then you just go to sleep. And then the bender ends until you're ready to start it again, which in my case was usually like a few days later. So at the end of this 2-week drinking bonanza that I had embarked on, I was clearing all the bottles up from my room. The house that I moved into was the house that I grew up in. So my mum still lives in the house where I grew up. And so I was in my old childhood bedroom. So I was clearing up these bottles, and I realised that I had been storing them at the top of my bed, which is what I used to do as a teenager to hide my drinking from my mum. I'd drink wine or liquor or whatever, and then kind of hide the bottles at the top of the bed. And I realised that I'd started doing that again. I kind of like reverted back to this like teenage behaviour. I was putting all these bottles into a black bag, and I remember I guess this was like a real significant moment in my life, because I can recall this whole experience really in quite great detail. Like I can remember the sound of the bottles like clinging in the bag as I was putting them away. And I picked up the bag, and then I sat at the end of my bed, and then I dropped the black bag of bottles next to my feet, and I heard all the clinking noises, and then I let out a big sigh, like in that moment, being in my childhood bedroom, being in the house where I experienced like quite a traumatic childhood. I spent so many years like hating myself and drinking to forget how much I hated myself. That kind of held up a mirror to me and just ushered in this real big moment of self-reflection. And I sat at the end of the bed, and I just received a message. I guess I would describe it as an epiphany. It was a moment of pure clarity, a moment of realization. I received a message that said to me, you don't need to do this anymore. You don't have to do this anymore. You don't have to live like this. You can let go now. And I realized I didn't have to keep on destroying my life. And I think I realized that I didn't want to keep on destroying my life. I think in that moment, I kind of realized that all these years of drinking and drugging and kind of self-destructive behavior, I realized that all these years I've just been making myself miserable. And I think in that moment, I realized that I didn't want to be miserable anymore. I realized I could be happy. I could live a happy life. And hey, I deserve a happy life. I deserve to be fulfilled, and I deserve to have good things in my life. I don't deserve to be depressed and miserable, especially at my own hand. And I had the power to change things. I could actually change things. And since I realized I did want to be happy, I realized that there was one thing, well, many things standing in my way, mostly myself, but there was one thing that was massively standing in my way, one thing that had all this power over me, one thing that I couldn't control, the thing that made me miserable, the thing that I was a slave to, basically, and that my entire life revolved around. And I realized that was alcohol. It was like I had solved an equation, like this really complicated algebra equation. It's like I've been trying to figure it out all my life. And then in that moment, I had solved it. I was like, oh my God, it's alcohol. It's alcohol. Obviously, drugs are part of my story as well, but alcohol is the one thing that I am powerless to. And it has never done me any favors. All it had done is just helped me destroy my life. And if I wanted to be happy, I couldn't take alcohol with me into my new future. Like, there was just no way I knew that I could not have a happy future with alcohol in it. Like those two worlds couldn't exist at the same time. I couldn't be happy and also drunk, like not a chance. And it was like this huge revelation. I just thought, I was sat at the end of my bed and I just suddenly realized I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to stop drinking. And that moment, I didn't even have, it wasn't like oh, maybe I should stop drinking. It was like a snap. It was like, I'm going to stop drinking. And I, in that moment, knew that that is what I wanted. I knew that I wanted to be sober. I knew that I wanted to be free. I wanted to be in control of my own life. I wanted to love myself. I wanted to like experience joy. I wanted to enjoy doing things again. And I wasn't taking alcohol with me. And I just knew I had to be sober. And I wanted to be sober. I didn't want to have that feeling of being drunk, out of control, that feeling of trying to juggle things. Like when you're an active alcoholic, you're always spinning so many plates because you're so drunk and your life is out of control, and you go to work drunk and you're hungover the next day, or you keep on drinking and you're constantly running around putting out fires that you've created due to your own drinking. I didn't want to have that anymore. I didn't want to live that life. It was just so stressful. I wanted freedom. I wanted peace. So armed with that decision, that very, very clear decision that I'm going to stop drinking, I did the thing that you should never, ever do. If you're watching this, do not follow my example. I mean, do follow my example and get sober, stop drinking. Fantastic, if that's what you need. But don't do this thing, which is go cold turkey. I stopped drinking completely. I didn't know at the time, but I know now how dangerous that is, especially if you're a heavy drinker. I was a very, very heavy drinker. And I didn't know that if you just stopped drinking alcohol, you can have seizures that can like threaten your life. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know anything about sobriety or recovery, or I didn't know where to start. All I knew was that I had to stop drinking. So I just stopped drinking. And I got so sick, really, really sick. I was in bed for a few days straight with a fever. The room was spinning. Like I was like hallucinating. I was like going in and out of consciousness. I was in a bad way. I was like shaking, and my mum was coming in and checking in on me. And I was like, I think I've got the flu. So if you are a heavy drinker and you're going to stop drinking, medical detox is the best way forward. Do it safely. Do it with like medical professionals. Don't do what I did. Heed my warning. Anyway, so after that little sickness period, like I guess it lasted about a week until I felt all right again. I felt like back on this planet. I went into sobriety and just like recovery, just like not knowing anything. Like I didn't know anything. If I could do it all again, I probably would have reached out to like organizations or my GP, and I don't know, I wouldn't have done it so much in isolation, because I like pretty much just one day I was like, right, I'm going to stop drinking, and then just never drank again. I had no plan, no structure. I literally had no idea what I was doing. I followed a few meme accounts on Instagram, some like recovery and sobriety meme accounts. That was pretty much what was guiding me, which isn't too bad actually, you know. It meant I had a sense of humor about things. But you know, I was on a high. I was riding the wave. I was like, oh my God, I've cured my sickness. I have unlocked the key to the universe. I have cracked the code of eternal happiness. Everything's fixed now. I've got no problems because I've quit drinking. That lasted a while actually. They call it the pink cloud, like, you know, when you've got rose tinted glasses on, the pink cloud, like when you first enter sobriety, and because you've got this new lease of life and you're like, self-improvement, and you've got this rush of like feeling better and I'm going to better myself, and you're excited about your future and you feel better like mentally and physically. So you're in the pink cloud, you're in this amazing place. But unfortunately it doesn't last forever. The novelty of early sobriety does wear away. I know mine did. I had a good few months where I was where I was feeling really good about myself. But eventually, yeah, it wore off, and I realized that I still had to live with all the reasons why I drank. I was still an alcoholic, but I was an alcoholic who didn't drink anymore. And I still had all my problems. Like, none of my problems, one of my problems went away, and that was the fact that I couldn't stop drinking. But all my other stuff was still there. All my unresolved trauma, my mental health issues, my depression was all still there. But now I couldn't use alcohol to help me cope. And I was not prepared for that. That was a big shock. So that's another thing I would do differently. I would probably have learned about myself a little bit more going into sobriety, learned about why I drank. I only kind of figured out why I was drinking so much, like quite far into sobriety. I had 2 years of like non-stop good times, really. Non-stop sobriety good times. I realized that I thrive off structure and routine and rituals. I had a very strict morning routine where I do like 30 minutes of exercise, followed by journaling, followed by meditation and yoga and all this kind of stuff. I had a very, very rigid schedule, and that kept me on the straight and narrow. I found that really helpful for me. And I realized I thrived off that, because if I had a routine to stick to, it meant I wasn't out causing chaos. But having my days mapped out for me was very helpful in the way that if I had like an hour by hour structure to go by, then there was very little room for me to slip back into my old ways. I'm a very impulsive person, quite unpredictable. So having structure to my days was really helpful. So that first year of sobriety was really good. I was just on cloud nine, and I was doing all the things that I needed to do, and I was feeling better. I was looking better. I was like physically and mentally, I was good. I was well. I was healthy. But unfortunately, it didn't last forever. And about 2 years into my sobriety, it sounds a bit lame that my downfall would be a man, but it was. I started dating, 2 years into sobriety, and then I met someone, a Canadian bloke. We didn't fall in love, but I liked him a lot. He was a shiny new thing. I turned him into a bit of a drug, actually, like I do with absolutely everything. And I just got quite obsessed with him in a like not in a crazy way. I wasn't like waiting outside his front door and hi, jumping out at him. No, I basically put a lot of my happiness depended on him. I realized that I had a lot of codependency issues. I didn't know how to make myself happy. And part of that is because I was drunk for like 15 years and for like my developmental years. And I just didn't know myself at all. And I didn't know how to make myself happy. I didn't know how to look inside of myself as a source of joy. I just had to rely on external things. And in this case, a person. So I put all my stock into this man, and then he broke up with me. And then I was like, oh no. That means I'm awful, and I don't deserve anything. Like, I didn't think about drinking again. I knew I wasn't going to drink again. That wasn't an option. But it did push me into a little bout of depression. And I realized that I had, lots of deep-rooted issues, mostly self-esteem issues. And then I sought out professional help, because I was starting to feel like I wanted to unalive myself again. And I was like, oh, that's not good. But I was 2 years sober at this point. So, if this had all happened, and this kind of stuff would happen when I was drinking, whenever I had like bouts of depression or bouts of really low self-esteem, like my first thought would be like, you should just end it all. Don't deserve to be here. But because I was sober, when I had those thoughts, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go through with it, or I'm going to go on a drinking binge. Because I was sober, I was like, oh, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to seek professional help because this is not good. So that was growth. I didn't drink on this. I actually went out and got help. And I went to my GP, and he did nothing. But I did persevere, and I got in touch with all the different mental health services in my area, in my local area. And do you know what? this actually ties in nicely to my next video that I want to make, which is about my mental health and sort of my experiences with that. Here's a spoiler, sorry. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So I'll talk a lot more about that and how that feeds into my addiction issues. And yeah, we'll get more into my mental health story journey. I promise not to leave it as long this time. I will not wait 3 months to do the next video. I promise I will do it within a couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. Come back soon. I will try and do it next week. Chemo fatigue, depending. If not, the week after. Okay, I promise. All right, I love you. Bye, bye, bye.